One feature of Sunan Ibn Majah is that it really focuses on the way of life. There is some more mystical information, but his focus was on what to do and what's better to do and all that. Narration 57 regards how faith has, many parts. And of these parts, the least is to remove something harmful. And the greatest is to take nothing as worthy of worship. Treating as a divinity, considering a divinity, etc., except God. Narration 58 tells us that one of these branches of faith is modesty. Narration 61 to 71 are about faith and how to stop war. So 61 regards some whom their faith kind of preceded their knowledge of Al-Quran. And you find in the early community and in what happened with other prophets, if there's more information, is that things came down and were learned gradually. It wasn't that, someone comes forth from the mountain with a whole book and everybody's just, I'm not quite sure what's in it, and all at once. That's not really what happened, right? Then we have a narration that reminds us that 2 ways to not have a share in Islam is to be of the Qadariyah, the people who think that things are destined to the point where you don't have a choice in your actions and all that. Because, there are 4 things predestined, and where you walk, so much of that is a choice. How good or evil you're going to be, so much of that is a choice. What your provision is, and how long your life is, so much of that can refer to personal choices. It's just that God has, knows beforehand and is written down. It's not, but God has decreed your opportunities and knows what you're going to do with them, basically, is the point. But, and the Marjia, the people who, make it about discourses and all this other stuff, not real world actions. Of course, you're not supposed to, you talk, and you do act, but you don't go around telling everybody about your, brag about your actions and all that. 63 is how somebody came in the form of a man, and, they had striking black hair and striking white clothes, and they asked about Islam, and of course they heard about the 5 pillars, to testify that nothing is worthy of worship except God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God, the establishing of the ritual prayers, the poor due, the fasting, the pilgrimage, and then the belief is asked about, and then, Muhammad ends up warning the people about a day when Arabs will be born from non-Arabs, and people compete in the building of tall buildings. I mean, some of that was going on, but not that people. And of course, this was the interaction with Jibril, which the light beings are, by the non-prophets, are usually not seen, are, consciously percepted. But people talk about, well, how do I things are going on spiritually that, people aren't necessarily aware of. It doesn't conflict with physical or psychological reality. Then we have a narration regarding Surah 31, ayat 34, and there are 5 secret signs of the Day of Judgment that aren't going to be known until they're known, right? And, but it's going to be obvious what they are, right? But one of the signs of the coming Day of Judgment is that a slave will give birth to the person in charge of them. And, the wars of conquest and all that, that people should kind of lay off that, right? Narration 65 reminds us that faith is internal, emotional even knowledge. And it's the words and the bodily actions in a court. And then we have a narration that tells us that if you want to be a believer, you love for others what you're going to love for yourself. The brother being a reference to, your brother and sister in Islam, sort of remember that to a degree there's sort of a gender neutrality in the masculine forms for and 67 is that as a believer we're supposed to love the messenger of God more than our familiar relations and all the people, and we see inklings of that in the Bible, but it's not quite as clear, is it? Then narration 68 tells us that we're not going to enter the paradise of the hereafter until we've been, until the believer state has been reached, and because certain stuff has to be dealt with. So some people do have punishment and stuff to deal with, and they become believers. But you become believers by loving one another, and this starts with the peaceful greetings that we're sharing. Assalamu alaikum, all that. Narration 69 tells us that we, if we know that someone's Muslim, it's obvious that verbal abuse is immorality. So, insulting nicknames and, the rest. And actually fighting them physically is an act of disbelief. In Surah 4, we have that more explicitly explained, right? And then we have a narration telling us that God is pleased with anybody who dies only worshiping God and maintaining both the contact prayers and the obliged charity. And finally, in narration 71, we find out that one of the ways to stop a fight with the Muslim people is that they testify to the singleness and uniqueness of God. Narration. There are other ways, alms, taxes, whatnot, but we don't start wars with people. We don't. Some people are going to take some of this stuff out of context per se, so I'll leave a little further note, is that we're absolutely not a people that starts wars with people because they believe something different. So, narration 75 tells us that faith increases and decreases. And a lot of this stuff, particularly if you read the Quran or some other spiritual text, you're going to you know, come to more conclusions. That's part of the reason why I don't get into pages and pages of washing and stuff like this. And some of it's, yeah, criteria of, this water is preferred over this water, and at what stage do you just tap the earth because it's, like stinky water. You should kind of know that one, right? Then we have a narration about the formation of the child in the womb and how a person can be very close to paradise or very close to hell, and then there can be a change. And we start out, you know, about 40 days were something kind of indistinguishable, and then we're kind of sort of cloddy, and then we're kind of lumpy, and then we really form as human beings. But, the decree of our life is kind of known at that point. Well, I mean, it's laid forth within us, our presence or whatever. Narration 78 regards Surah 92 ayat 2 through 10. 5 through 10. And so if we're going to go towards the right way, then it's going to be easier, and the other way, that can be made easier too. And before that,